Hey everyone, it's Gabby here. In this video, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step walkthrough of how to accomplish this scrolling horizontal UI directly in your Bubble app. So you can see as I click on that right arrow, it's moving me over to the right. I can hover over these different cards here and it makes them a little bit bigger just to emphasize the one that we want to select. I can also go in the opposite direction. Notice that we're not seeing any ugly scroll bars. We have some nice smooth animations here. It's a really polished design that's quite popular with different streaming services. So if you're building an app in Bubble that is going to display a list of things in a layout like this, follow along because I'm going to take you through exactly how we accomplish this right now. Okay, so we're in the editor here for this page. The vast majority of this design is going to come together within this tab here, the design tab. Now there are two workflows that we'll be looking at a little bit later to trigger our navigation actions to actually scroll left and scroll right, but I'm going to start with walking you through the hierarchy of all of my visual elements so that you have a big picture view over what's involved here. So my first layer on this page is my main group. I usually have like a starting primary group to put everything inside of. Okay, I'm going to open this up, and directly within that first layer is I have a text here for the title of my page. I have another group, which is going to be all of the content that's in the center of the page. Okay, and then I have another group down below, which you really can't see when you're previewing it here. This is really just holding a couple of plugins that are helping me with the design as well. So I'll talk about those in just a second. So let's take a look at this, this middle element here, this group RG plus arrows, RG for repeating group. I'm going to open this up. So this also contains three elements within it. So we have our repeating group, and this is our kind of main event here. This is the element that's going to display our dynamic list, and we can scroll through horizontally. Okay, and then layered on top of the repeating group, we have a group left and a group right, and those just contain these arrow icons. And this is to get this kind of fade in, fade out effect when we're moving left and right through our list, and you can see that they appear and disappear depending on where we are in the list. So if I'm at the start, I don't see that left group because that's a visual cue to the user that we are at the beginning of the list. And the same thing happens at the end, let them know that we're at the end of the list. Okay, and then we have our repeating group inside of the repeating group cell. Okay, I have another group here to help me design and organize the actual content. So this group here is where you're going to be putting all of your dynamic information. Maybe it's an image or a button, other text, whatever you want to display in this list. So right now I just have a text showing my movie title, and the group is going to help me with the background color. But that's where you're going to really customize things. Okay, and then going back to our plugins group here, I just want to call these out real quick. So I have two plugins that are helping me with this UI. One of them you do not need to worry about. I have a random color generator just to be able to quickly put this design here with these different colored backgrounds, make it give it some variety there. But that's not actually contributing to the horizontal functionality of this. Okay, but the other one here, hide scroll bar, is helping us with the effect that we're getting. So if we didn't have this plugin, the repeating group would otherwise show a very ugly, default browser horizontal scroll bar. And we don't really want the user to interact with that scroll bar. Instead, we want them to interact with our custom arrows that we've designed. So this plugin is a free one that I have installed to my app called Hide Scroll Bar. It has a hide scroll bar element, and that is exactly what I have on the page in order to hide the scroll bar. There are lots of other plugins that are very similar to this where you can customize, if you did want to show a scroll bar, but maybe you wanted to change the colors or change the height and width of the tracks or make it more subtle, you can certainly customize those things with these plugins that can override those design settings. Okay, so let's collapse this down here, and now let's take a look at the repeating group and the structure of these elements, because there are very specific settings to get the horizontal functionality going. So the first thing we're going to look at is at the group level that contains the repeating group and our left and right groups. Okay, this group's layout is an align to parent layout. That allows us to have elements overlap one another inside of the group. So with align to parent here, the repeating group inside is going to be in the center of its parent group. The group left is going to be in the middle left section of the align to parent group. And group right is going to be on the middle right of that group. Okay, that's very important for, to get this overlapping effect here with our elements. So the parent group's layout is set to align to parent. All right. Now, the repeating group is our element to display all of our dynamic information. So let's go over to the Appearance tab here. In my case, I'm wanting to show a list of movies. So I set the type of content to my movie data type, and then my data source is just a search for movies. So I have just a few here in my sample database. Okay, so if you're wanting to display a list of books or a list of user profiles, right? Just choose the right data type and then search for it. Maybe it's coming from a custom state or an input of some kind. Likely it's going to come from your, searching the database, but this is where you're going to define that dynamic data source. Now, here we are setting this repeating group specifically to only be one row. So I'm fixing it to one row. And we don't want to have a fixed number of columns because that's what's going to allow us to scroll through the number of items in our list. We don't want to tell Bubble specifically how many columns to create because it'll just stop there, right? We want that scrolling effect. So you want to leave this part unchecked. Now, you have a lot of flexibility here in terms of how many things you want to see at a time, how many of these cells. That's going to be dictated by two things. First is the minimum width of the individual column itself. So I've set it to 250. You can see here if I make this a lot bigger, just kind of exaggerate this to double the size, you can see I'm going to see less at one time because I'm forcing Bubble to make each cell a lot wider. Right, so if I take this back to 250, now each column is more narrow and I can see more at a time. So that's the first thing that gives you control. The second thing is the overall width of the repeating group itself. So over here in my layout tab, you can see that I have no max width. It's not fitting to content and I'm not fixing it to anything. So that tells Bubble to expand it as wide as it can possibly go on the page within its immediate parent. Okay, now the repeating group is inside of this parent group here, and same rules will apply. Because I have no max width, no fit width to content, no fixed width, it is completely responsive to the width of the page. So it's going to expand as wide as it possibly can go within its parent. Let's go up one more parent, group main, and here we finally have a decision that was made, which is to max out the width of our main group to 1200 pixels. So that means that anything inside of the main group cannot be wider than 1200 pixels. So if I wanted to take this down to, let's say 800, then this is a much more narrow design on my page. So that's the second thing that will, if it'll have a ripple effect down to the repeating group down below. If you can't be wider than that, then you're going to see less columns as well. Okay, so be mindful of that width there. I'm going to take this back to 1200. Okay, so we have our repeating group in the center. We've defined our widths, so we can dictate how many columns we want to see. The other thing is the separator here between my cells. So because I have a completely black background, I want the space between each of the cards here to not only show, like I do want to see some space, but I also want it to blend in with the background. So what I have added are separators, solid separators, 10 pixels in width, and they're also completely black, just like the background color for my page overall. Just to exaggerate this a little bit more, if I change this to 20, you can see that separation gets a little bit thicker. If I make it 1, we can barely see it there. So this is what I like to do. I've seen other folks accomplish this same effect by adding margins to the, this group that's inside, or, borders on things. You can certainly do that, but I've always found this to be the most effective because you know that it's going to be uniform across all of the cells in the repeating group because Bubble adds those separators between each cell for you. So I like to take advantage of that. Okay, real quick here. If you're finding this helpful, we have so much more to teach you over in our free extended workshop at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach for going from idea to app. So if you're looking for a start to finish guide, go ahead and register for that workshop right after this video. You'll get immediate access. For now, let's get back to our lesson. Now, let's move into the group inside. Okay, so this is just a regular group element to hold any dynamic content. You can see the type of content is still movie, and the data source is the cells movie. So when we're working within this group here, we are now from the perspective of one movie record at a time. Now, for my demonstration, remember I have that random color generator creating colors for me so that I can give it a background color. You do not need to do this. Maybe your background is just a plain white, or maybe it's an image. This is completely up to you. I do have a condition on this group to create that enlarging effect. okay, for when the group is hovered. So let me show you one more time, right? When I move over these here, you can see that the groups get bigger, and it's just the one that I'm hovering over, just like that. So how did I accomplish that? Well, the first thing you'd want to look at is your default layout settings. I have this group's dimensions set to 250 pixels wide by 150 pixels tall, and those are fixed. So they're always going to be that size, width, and height, okay? Then in the condition, I'm changing those. When the group is hovered, we're going to increase the width and increase the height by just a little bit, so it gives us that effect. Okay, now the second part to this, if you notice that when I hover and I move away, it's a smooth transition. It grows and then it shrinks. Okay, it's not popping up bigger and popping down to that smaller size. So to accomplish that kind of ease in, ease out effect, we're going to go back to the appearance tab. We're still at the group here. I'm going to scroll all the way down. And what I have here are transitions, which I think is a severely underused feature with applications that I've seen here being built on Bubble, especially when you're trying to create more polished interactions, with the visual elements. So at the bottom, you can select a property to where you can define a transition, which basically means if you have a condition or anything that's going to change the property's value, and this is a great example of one, then you can tell Bubble to apply a transition to that change. So in my case, I have this condition that's changing the width and height. So therefore, I'm creating two transitions for the width and height. I just looked for that property. You can search for it here, right? I've already applied them, so they're not going to come up in the list. So I'm applying a transition to that change. And you have a few different options here for the styling of that transition and also for how long the transition should take. So right now I've got both of these set to half a second, easing in and out of our default width and height and our conditional. Okay, so that's how I accomplish that one there. Now, along with that, I'm also applying a change to the font size of my movie title. Notice that when I hover over the titles, I mean, you might not even notice because they really are moving together, but the titles are getting bigger. The font size is getting bigger and smaller when I move away and over them there. And so the title itself, I have a condition. Well, let's take a look at the default, right? So my default font size is 34 pixels. And then I have a condition that says when this group is hovered or when the text itself is hovered. Okay, that's something you just want to be mindful of, especially if you have, depending on what you want the user to hover over to trigger these things, just be mindful of what elements are actually, you should actually trigger the change. So if either one of these are hovered, then I'm increasing the font size by just a little bit. I'm going to show you here, I'm going to remove this to show you what this looks like without the text also changing its font size. It's subtle, but I think it does make a difference. Okay, so you can see when I make it bigger, the text stays the same, right? But my group is growing, it's expanding there, then contracting. And maybe you like that better. That's perfectly fine. But this is how we can accomplish these different types of interactions. And really, these subtle touches can make a world of difference in the user's experience. So just like with the group, on the text, I have a transition as well for the font size. That's the property that I'm wanting to apply the transition to. All right, so there is our repeating group and the content inside. Again, everything else that you want to display inside of that group is gonna go there. Okay, now the group left and group right are gonna work exactly the same. They're just on opposite sides of our parent group. Okay, so remember, group left is positioned here in the center left, and group right is on the center right. Now, because we're in an align to parent element, these groups are overlapping. So make sure that your repeating group is behind those two. You can double check that by right clicking the repeating group and you can say send to back, right? If I do send to or bring to front here, you can see here it actually moved in front of the left there. And if I preview the page, it's just going to, those left and right arrows are just going to disappear. We want to make sure that the repeating group is behind our left and right groups. So let me do that again, send to back. Okay, so looking at group left here, I have a max width set to about half, maybe a little over half of the cell size. Remember the cell size, I have this set to 250. Okay, and so I have the width of the left group to 150. I don't want it to completely overlap that because I want to create this kind of partial hiding of the first cell and the very last cell. Okay, now back over to the appearance tab. The way that I create that transition from completely black to now seeing the card behind it is with the background style set to a gradient. So this gradient is a linear gradient, and the direction means that the starting color is on the left side. So you can see my starting color is completely black, right? That way it blends in with the background. And the ending color is, I technically have it to black as well, but I have it at 0% of opacity. So it's completely transparent. So it's going to transition, it's going to be a gradient from a fully opaque black color to a fully transparent, no color, right? We can see through it. So you can also choose to add an intermediate color if you want to play around with the intensity of the gradient, if you want to add a third color in there. Just note that the width of that group, the color that you choose, the percentage of the transparency here, of the opacity, will affect, how it looks. So you can really tweak that appearance for that element. And the exact same setup is happening here on group right. The only difference is the gradient direction. So our starting color is now on the right side because we want the right side to be that black to blend in with the page. Okay, and then inside of the groups, we have our icons, really nothing too special going on here. I just have an arrow, I've chosen a color for it, and that's pretty much it. Our workflows are actually going to be triggered not by clicking on the arrow itself, but actually the entire group, because we want to give the user a bigger target to click so that it's not as difficult for them to navigate. Makes it a little bit more convenient. Now I'm going to show you real quick here how to set up this hide scroll bar functionality. This is from our plugin. So first thing you want to do is just add that element to your page. So if you go to your asset search, make sure the plugin's installed, of course, and you can search for it here, hide scroll bar. I've added it to this group. It just has to exist somewhere on your page. I recommend not putting it inside of the repeating group, just somewhere else. And the way that the plugin works is that the element needs to communicate with the repeating group whose scroll bar you want to hide. Okay, so at the repeating group level, at the very bottom of the property editor here, I've given it an ID attribute. This is just like an internal ID that I'm giving it completely customized. So I just called it movies. Okay, and if we go to the plugin element here, we can see that I've typed in the same word, so they're going to communicate with one another. If you have multiple repeating groups, you may want to have multiple instances of this element. You could add other hide scroll bar elements where they have different IDs so that, one element isn't affecting all of your repeating groups. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you do have multiple repeating groups where you want the exact same thing to happen. Just give all of those repeating groups the exact same ID. Okay, so you can play with that however you need. Now, if you do not see this field here at the bottom of your repeating groups property editor, it means that your ID attribute function is not enabled in your app. So you want to go over to your settings, then go over to general, scroll to nearly the bottom of this screen. Let's go over here. There we go. And it's the second to last setting. Show the option to add an ID attribute to HTML elements. Just make sure you check that box on the very right. As soon as you do that, all of your visual elements will have the ability to take a custom ID attribute. Okay, right? So, and that's it. As soon as you hook those up, the scroll bar is gone, right? So just as an example, if I remove the ID attribute, the plugin is not going to find it. So if I refresh the page, we're going to see the very ugly scroll bar just like this. We don't want this here. All right, so now we're going to look at the workflows for triggering these navigation actions when we click on the right and left groups. We're going to be working with a custom state. If you've never worked with custom states before, we're not doing anything too crazy, but we are going to keep track of where we are in our list so that we know when to move the repeating group forward or backward or show and hide these left and right groups. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to create our custom state. So if you, I would recommend putting this on either the repeating group or just your primary group so that you remember where it is, it's easy to find. So I have mine here on my group main. I'm going to open up my element inspector. This is where I can manage the states for this group. And I have a state here called first cell in view. First cell in view. I try to name it very literally so we know exactly what it's describing. This is just a number. Okay, you can see that I'm defaulting this number to 1. So what do I really mean by first cell in view? Okay, so when I first load the page, this position in our overall list is the first cell in my view that I'm actually seeing here. I can see number 1, I can see number 2, 3, 4, and only a little bit of 5. Now, if I advance forward, I no longer see item number 1. I only see a little bit of number 2. I see 3, 4, 5, and a little bit of 6. So what I mean by first cell in view is what can we still see at the beginning of the list? Here, that first cell would be 2. I advance again, now it would be 3. Advance again, now it would be 4. If I go back, now it's back to 3. Okay, that number, I'm updating it. Every time I click left and right, I'm updating that number to keep track of where I am. And that's really important because it's going to help us understand when to hide or show our left and right arrows. Okay, so I'm going to default to 1 because every time I load the page, the user is going to start with the beginning of the list there. Okay, so let's go over to the workflow. Just wanted to point out that that custom state is needed first. I'm going to start with when we click on group right. I think that's going to be a little bit easier to understand first because we're kind of moving forward in the repeating group. Okay, and I'm also going to go through these actions out of order, again, to make it easier to follow. So one of the things that happens when we click on group right is we're going to update that custom state. Okay, so that's technically my second action here, right? We're doing a set state action, so you can find this under element actions, set state, or you can just search for it, set state of an element. I've chosen my group main. That's where my custom state lives, first cell in view. Remember that this is just a number. And if I'm moving to the right, then all I want to do is add 1 to that number. So I'm taking group mains, first cell in view, plus 1. Okay, whatever it is currently, adding 1 to it. Then I'm going to scroll to a specific entry in my repeating group. When your repeating group is a scrolling element, Bubble can move the repeating group for you through a workflow action to a specific item in that list. And what it's looking for here is just a number. Guess what? That's exactly what our custom state is, and that's exactly why we have it. Okay, so the scroll to entry, you can find that in the element actions again, and you're going to see over here, scroll to entry of a repeating group. Be careful to not select the scroll to an element. That is a different action. That's scrolling to a specific element on your page. We want to scroll to a specific entry of a repeating group. So if I click on right here, Bubble has scrolled to the Moana entry here in my repeating group. If I go back, Bubble is scrolling to this item in my repeating group. Okay, so whatever number we have just set in the previous step, that's the item that we're going to. Item number 1, item number 2, 3, 4, okay? So it's completely dynamic. I am animating the scrolling just to make it a little bit more fluid. I also have this vertical offset to move the position that the scrolling lands on 75 pixels further to the right. Let me actually go back to my preview here. So if I click on the right side here, you can see that we're not actually seeing the very beginning of, the very left side of this group. Of course, we do have that gradient covering it, that black to transparent gradient, but it is actually pushed over to the right even more because of my vertical offset. You don't have to have the vertical offset. That's just another kind of fine tuning that you can play with to fine tune the positioning of everything. And again, it'll depend on the widths of everything to see what's going to look the best. So you can play with whether you want that on or off and how much of an offset. Okay, so far we have updated our first cell in view and we've scrolled the repeating group to that item number. Now, I have 2 other actions here, animate group right, animate group left, that are conditional. So they may not run if I click on group right. Maybe one of them runs, maybe both of them run, maybe none of them do. So they're conditional depending on where we are in the list. And more importantly, where we have just moved to, right? Because when I click on right, I'm advancing 1. I'm going to the right by 1 more card in my list. So these may or may not run because I may not be at the very end, I may not be at the very beginning. Let's take a look at this example here. So this is going to animate the left group in, right? It's going to make it visible. So this is an animation action that you can find under element actions and animate right here. You'll want to select the element you want to animate. In this case, it's my entire group left. That's the element with the icon. It's with the background and also the icon inside of it. Okay. And The animation that I chose, and you have a whole big list to choose from, was this transition slide left in. So I'm really wanting it to be a smooth entry as if it was coming from the left side of the screen. So I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to click on right. You can see it slides in very subtly there. Okay. I do want to define a custom duration. The default moved a little bit too fast for me, so I slowed it down. I think it was by default 500 milliseconds, half a second. So I've changed it to 750 milliseconds. And notice that I only want this to happen if the first cell in view is 2. Remember, this action is bringing in that left arrow. It's bringing in that left arrow. So the only time I need to make it visible is if I have just moved to cell 2, right? So let's say I've just loaded the page. Right now, that first cell in view is 1. By default, that group is hidden. Okay, we don't see it here. Now, when I move to 2, it's going to be visible, right? I need to see it now because there's an item that is out of view. So I need to let the user know this visual cue here with my arrow that they can go back 1. Now, technically, if I'm on 3 and I go back 1, that is also taking the number back to 2. But that's actually a different workflow. That's when I click on the left side. We're still only on the workflow for the right side. So the right side for animating the left arrow in is just going to happen in this particular, when we're in this state right here. We're at the start of the list and I'm moving to 2. Okay, and notice that the right side does not go away. That means that my first action has not run. So this also has a condition on it. So this is going to animate the right group out. Okay, so I chose slide right out, also my custom duration. Now this condition is probably the most complex. It's not that bad, but it's probably the most complex in this whole design, which is to say, if the first cell in view plus 4 is the same number as the total number of items in our list, then we know we are at the end of our list. We've just navigated to the end. And so we want to animate the right group out. So the scenario here is, I'm going to go to the very end, like, I think this is the last one right there. Okay, so this cell in view, let's see, I think I have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So right now my first cell in view is number 6. So 6 plus 4 takes me to 10. 10 is the total number of items in my list. They match, 10 equals 10. So when that condition passes, now that right side goes away, and that tells the user, gives them a visual cue that we are at the end of our list. Now, why did I choose 4? Only because of the widths of my columns in my repeating group. That number may be different for you. Okay, if you have wider columns and you're seeing less at a time, this number is going to be lower. If you have more narrow columns and you're seeing many more at a time, then you may have a bigger number, right? So I'm taking the first cell plus 4 to understand when the user is going to see the last item in the list, and therefore we want to hide that right group. Okay, now the left side being clicked is pretty much the exact same with just a few things reversed. Okay, so we're setting the state here as well, and we're going to subtract 1. Whatever the number is, our first cell in view minus 1 because we're going backwards. The scroll to entry is the exact same setup for the expression. It's just scroll to our list of movies, item number, whatever is in our custom state. Okay, so if I'm going from 3 to 2, then go to number 2, right? Position number 2. Now on this end of things, I'm not doing a vertical offset because if I'm moving to the beginning of the list, I don't want to cut off the first item in the list. I actually want to see the full card there. Now you could have 2 of these scroll actions with conditions to say if we're moving specifically back to the first item, then you don't have the offset, and then a second action with a different condition that says if we're moving to anything else, right, anything greater than 1, then you can have the 75 pixel offset or whatever number so that it matches the right side for a little bit more consistency. Okay, so over here, again, very similar to the other side, we're going to animate the right side in. Remember, we're moving left. So, there will be a point where you pull to the left and you're no longer seeing the end of the list. And so we want to bring the right side in. Same duration and the exact same condition here with regards to the right side. We're going to look at the first cell in view plus 4. If it matches the end, then we're going to bring that right side back in. And then for animating the left group out, This is if we are currently in 2 and about to move to 1, right? And note the position of my actions. This is at the start of the workflow before I update the custom state. So if I'm currently on 2 and I'm moving now to 1, I want to animate the left side out because I do not need to see that arrow when I'm on position 1. I'm already at the start of the list, right? If it's 2, I'm about to move to 1, we want to slide that out. All right, there you have it. That's how you can put together a horizontal scrolling UI in your Bubble application. There are obviously many different parts to this build that you can custom fit to your app's needs. Things like the sizing of the columns, how many items you want to see at one time, the transitions, the animations, the speed of these transitions and animations, obviously the content inside of the card. But hopefully this gave you a really strong foundation. And if you want to share what you've put together in your app, feel free to comment below. All right, I hope that was helpful. And if it was, don't forget to register for that free extended training over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. You'll get immediate access as soon as you register. And the link for that is in the description below. Okay, happy building.